Good afternoon. My name is Joanne Davis, and I'm a safety advisor here at the Saskatchewan Construction Safety Association. Welcome to today's Wednesday webinar. And before we get started, we're going to go around and get our fellow panelists to introduce themselves. We'll start with you, Kieran.
Hi everyone, my name is Kieran Greening. I am also a safety advisor with the association. I deal with a few different regions out of the Saskatoon office. You might know me if you're around the Prince Albert regions, Macklin out west, and Humboldt east.
Thank you. Mike?
Thanks, Joanne. Name is Mike Moore. Looks like I have a lightsaber coming out of my headphones, so I love it. So, my name is Mike Moore. I'm an advisor out of Saskatoon, and I take care of the Battleford, Lloydminster, and Meadow Lake regions.
Thank you. And Steve?
Hi, Steve Waldbar. I work with Joanne out of the Regina office. My region is pretty much the south of the #1 right now. And I see the lightsaber now, Mike. I didn't see it before, but I do now.
It's hilarious. I love it. It looks great.
Well, thank you all for joining us today. So we're going to jump right into this. We're going to have some good conversation. I'm going to start off today with a bit of a presentation on some hazards associated with construction tools, both and we're talking handheld tools. So, and some of them are going to be powered. So your battery operated, power operated, smaller hand tools. We're going to talk about that. So I'm going to share my screen and go over a few things, and then we're going to have some really good discussions on what we can do and the problems we see as workers. It always takes me a second to share my screen, so let me get organized here. Okay. And again, before we get started, just want to let you know this is being recorded, so you can be watching this live on Zoom right now with us. You can also be watching it on Facebook, and you will be able to have access to it on YouTube. And again, these are recorded and you can watch them later with your crews if you'd like. Okay, so let's talk about tools. So along with common injuries such as cuts, lacerations, bruises, their frequent and prolonged use of hand tools can cause soreness, aches, pains, and fatigue, which when ignored can lead to chronic musculoskeletal injuries, MSIs. Of various kinds. The most common examples of these work-related musculoskeletal disorders are tendonitis, tendinovitis, bursitis, tennis elbow, carpal tunnel syndrome as well. And we're going to go through a few of these. You can find prevention tips in documents on Occupational Health and Safety website as well. So we're going to go into some factors that go into these hazards. So factors when working with tools can cause discomfort, fatigue, and eventually work-related musculoskeletal disorders. Several factors that can affect the health and performance of hand tool users include static load on arms and upper body muscles, awkward work positioning and body postures, tissue compression and vibration. And we're going to go into a couple of those a little deeper here. So when we're talking about static load, it is static load or effort that occurs when muscles are kept tense and motionless. So an example would be holding the arms elevated, as you see in the first figure, for a few minutes while you're working. So if you've experienced this, you know what we're talking about. You're going to start feeling that tension. Put objects in your outstretched hand, and its weight you'll feel the static force compared to if you're holding it close. Okay. Next, it is also holding any strained position for a period of time. So this is a particularly undesirable component of any work situation. Static effort increases the pressure on both the muscles as well as tissues, tendons, and ligaments. It also reduces blood flow, which can cause localized fatigue in a much quicker rate than would be expected if you were performing dynamic work, which includes movement. Okay. So next here, hand tools are often used when there was a limited space and access is difficult. So when using hand tools in awkward body position, you have less strength in sequence to more susceptible to soreness and eventually injury. If an arm is uncomfortable, the rest of the body is also going to be. So we're talking about awkward body positioning postures. So awkward positioning in the upper body considerably increases the effort needed to complete the task. This results in fatigue, discomfort, and pain, and further risk to developing injury. So we'll talk about some solutions to this a little later on.
Joanne, I'd like to touch base there. This prompts me to recent current events. So I was looking at building some work tables in my garage, and let me tell you, there's some data out there on what height to put your work table for exactly this, awkward work positions. I wanted a work table actually for my children because I want to build birdhouses in the garage and do stuff like that. And I needed to find out, I had to get a proper medium to accommodate the kids, but then also if it's going to take up shop space, I want these things to be able to work for me. Hey, so there'll be certain projects that I can use on a low work table for me that I would have no business doing with smaller projects, because I'll have to be hunched over the whole time, and I'll end up with a lot of back strain and a lot of strain to the midsection and mid back and that. So I get this totally is a total applicable thing to anyone that has a workshop or even setting up on site for certain applications.
Yes, definitely. We're talking about awkward working positions. So when you do have a shop and you can actually adjust the height. So having adjustable workbenches and stuff would be key.
Yep.
But a lot of times, like in the picture you see on the screen, this is obviously a workshop. So you can build it to your needs, but out on the job, you don't always have that option, right? So you're going to be working at extended awkward positions.
And it's really interesting, the difference of 4 inches. So the difference between a work table that when I'm standing straight and that work table is at the end of my fingertips, which the work tables in my shop that I built for the kids are actually at my fingertips, is a lot different than kind of the recommended height that I came across was at up around the wrist level but for different applications, there's different data out there. So really interesting point there.
Yeah, definitely. The next thing we're going to look at is tissue compression from forceful grips. So as a rule, using a hand tool is going to require a firm grip, right? You're holding onto that tool. So the resulting compression of soft tissue in the palm, fingers may obstruct blood flow, circulation, resulting in numbness and tingling. Blisters are also commonly due from friction between the palm and the handle of the tool. So here we just have an example of using this saw when doing concrete. Vibration, I did mention, you're going to hear that several times as well. Certain tools such as chipping hammers, there's quite a variety of tools that actually will cause vibrations, are responsible for hand-arm vibration syndrome, and also commonly known as white finger Raynaud's syndrome, which I'm going to be getting into detail next. So this is just an example of what can cause that. So getting into Raynaud's phenomenon syndrome, like I said, it's called white fingers, wax fingers, dead fingers. There's a few different names for them. It's a disorder of blood circulation in the fingers and also toes. It can occur, and less commonly the ears and nose. So a lot of times the work you do can aggravate it if you already have it, but you could also be caused by the work you do. So this condition, if it does develop, is aggravated by exposure to cold. When a person has Raynaud's phenomenon, exposure to cold abnormally reduces blood circulation, causing the skin to become pale, waxy white, or purple. The disorder, like I said, is also called the white fingers. Raynaud's phenomenon has many different causes, including workplace exposure. It is commonly associated with hand-arm vibration syndrome, which I mentioned earlier. So having this awareness can help prevent disorders from occurring or progressing to a serious stage. If it's not detected in the early stages, this disorder can permanently impair blood circulation to the fingers. Can be cause disability and may force workers to leave their jobs, although rare. severe cases can lead to breakdown of skin and gangrene. Less severe affected workers sometimes have to change their social activities and work habits to avoid attacks of white fingers. So you do get attacks that come and go. Within the workplace, several hazards can cause this phenomenon. Exposure to vibration from power tools is the greatest concern. Handheld power tools such as chainsaws, jackhammers, pneumatic rock drillers, chippers can cause arm vibration syndrome, which can also induce white fingers. Signs and symptoms. So attacks of poor blood circulation in the fingers are most noticeable symptom of this phenomenon. The attacks occur when the hand or the whole body get cold, either at work or at home, or from stress, household or leisure activities resulting in cold exposure, including washing a car, or holding a cold steering wheel of a car, or the cold handlebars of a bicycle. Attacks of white fingers can occur when a person is outdoors watching sports or gardening, fishing, or cold weather. So these attacks usually include cold fingers or toes, tingling and slight loss of feeling, numbness in the fingers, toes, nose, lips, and ears, blanching, whitening of the fingers, usually without affecting the thumb, numbness, prickly fingering, stinging pain, sometimes redness upon warming or relief of stress. Sequence of color change in the skin may progress from white to blue to red. It gradually gets worse if workers remain exposed to the condition that caused the problem. As the disorder gets worse, the attack becomes stronger and more frequent. So it's extremely important to recognize the signs and symptoms at the early stages. So on a personal note, my father was a miner and did a lot of drilling. And so he was experiencing these symptoms. And now that he's retired, it has alleviated. And he did wear the gloves to help reduce that. But when you're doing it day in for years, you can come across this. The next couple of slides are a couple of classifications they use. So you can have a grade. None is you have no attacks. One, mild, occasionally affects only the tips of one or more fingers. Moderate is occasional attacking fingertips and middle of the fingers. So it's going down your finger. Severe, most part of your fingers is affecting all of them. And very severe, you'll have skin changes in the fingertips as well. And then there's stages as well, sensory neural assessment. Symptoms, so you'll have exposure to vibration but no symptoms. 1 SN, intermediate numbness with or without tingling. 2 SN, intermittent or persistent numbness, reducing sensory perception. And 3 SN, intermittent or persistent numbness, reducing tactile discrimination or manipulative dexterity. So you're just really having trouble grabbing onto things, and it's affecting you able to feel things as well. So that's one of the ones we want to talk about. The next one is tendon disorders. So tendons, number one, are rope-like bundles or bands of strong, smooth, shiny fibers that attach to muscle or bone. Tendons transfer force from the muscle to the bone to produce a movement of a joint. There are two types of tendons, tendons with sheaths and tendons without sheaths. Okay, so there's a couple examples here on the screen. So tendon disorders are a medical condition that result in tendons not functioning normally. Tendinitis is a disorder of tendons without sheaths, and tendinosynovitis is a disorder of tendons with sheaths. So these terms are to describe inflammation or irritation of a tendon with repetitive and prolonged activities, forceful exertion, awkward and static postures, vibration and localized mechanical stress. The tendon fibers can tear apart in much the same way that a rope becomes frayed. Tendon changes can trigger inflammatory response. Inflammation is localized response to tissue to the injury. Over time, inflamed tendons become thickened, bumpy, and irregular. Without rest and time for the tissue to heal, tendons can become permanently weakened. So with repetitive prolonged activities, like I mentioned, it causes friction and inflammation. So shoulders are often very common. Disorder of the tendon, rotator cuff, as well as this disorder of the rotator cuff, it helps rotate the humerus upper arm bone and raise the arm. Hand and wrist are also, there's several of them that we'll take a look at. But you have all the names on here, all the different names for the different tendinitises that can occur in the arm that we commonly see in construction. Oh, sorry, it jumped around. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about tennis elbow. It is a common term used for the painful elbow disorder. This term refers to inflammation that occurs in a small point or projection of the upper arm bone, the humerus, just above the elbow joint on the outer side of the arm. This pain can also occur in the forearm and wrist as well. The pain from tennis elbow comes mainly from injury or damage to tendons near the elbow. Tendons are strong bands tissues, like I said, and if they're overused and stretched, they become inflamed and degenerate. This results in a painful condition. Okay, so what causes this disorder? There's often a combination of factors that lead to tendon disorder. And they are repetitive movement, excessive force, frequent overhead reaching, vibration, and awkward body position. Okay. So common arm motions that are associated with tennis elbow include using plumbing tools, painting, driving screws, and repetitive computer mouse use as well. So the symptoms are characterized by the presence of pain on site of the injury. There is a decrease in strength and functionality as well. Specific physical findings on exam include tenderness of the area over the affected tendon when it's touched. And there may be swelling, redness, and restriction of movement. Treatments, you can have surgery, but oftentimes the most important thing, it very rarely leads to surgery, is to rest from activities that cause the pain in the first place, and then use correct posture and motion. Bursitis is another condition that can occur. It's inflammation of the bursa, known as bursitis. It is a small sac containing fluid that lies between the bones and other body parts. So here we have an example in the knee. So if you're doing a lot of work on your knees, you can actually get inflamed and you can get bursitis. So again, the main symptom is pain and swelling. It can be diagnosed by medical tests such as x-rays, and it's treated, it's treatable. Most people go back to work without any restrictions. Occupations at risk are carpet and floor layers, painters, tile setters, gardeners, landscapers. So you can prevent this by rotating work schedules, stretching, and also PPE, good knee pads will also help prevent this. I just want to touch a little bit on carpal tunnel syndrome as well. It's a condition that affects the hands and wrists. And there are small tunnels that pass through the flexing tendons of the finger and thumb. And symptoms of carpal tunnel, typical carpal tunnel syndromes include tingling of the thumb and index, middle finger, and ring finger at night. The pain awakens the patient often, but is often relieved when you shake your hand or massage it as well. Numbness and loss of manual dexterity can occur. Weakness of the hand can also occur, causing difficulty to pinch and grasp. You may drop objects and may be unable to pick up keys. People who are suspected carpal tunnel syndrome should consult a doctor. Obviously, with any of these conditions, please consult a doctor. There are different tests the doctor will do. Another interesting fact about carpal tunnel syndrome is women are 3 times more likely than men to develop this syndrome. And that's because carpal tunnel is generally smaller than those in men. So it gets pinched a lot easier. It can be treated with rest, anti-inflammatories, splints as well. It is best to seek diagnosis and treatment as early as possible to avoid permanent damage to the median nerve. Okay, some occupational factors include repetitive hand motion, awkward hand position, strong gripping, mechanical stress of the palm, vibration. You often see it in assembly line workers, as well as besides carpentry, you see them in cashiers, hairdressers, anything that involves repetitive wrist movements. Spray gun painting as well. I have quite a big list here of different causes or occupations. Here is an example of some of the stretches you can do to prevent. Prevention would involve redesigning workstations, tools, or jobs, educating workers, and reducing awkward wrist positioning. Okay, one last one I want to go through, the Hypo, Thelmar, Hamill syndrome. And this is where the blood flow to the fingers is reduced. And this is because you're using a group of muscles in your palm repeatedly, and you're using the hand, to push or grind with your palm. So that's what's causing it. And you see here, I included a pair of gloves to help reduce that pressure. And better yet is not to use the tool in that manner. The symptoms of this syndrome include pain over palm and ring finger, pins and needles, loss of sensation, difficulty holding heavy objects with affected hand. The fingers become sensitive to cold as well. Okay, so that was a couple of the conditions and syndromes that can occur from using hand tools. Okay, so here we have stretching. I've done a lot of these stretching, a lot of jobs that we do. Before we go to work, we'd be able to, everybody would get together and do your stretch, do your toolbox talks and stuff, and then you do your stretch. And then you also see the hand stretches for carpal tunnel. I've done that a lot, especially with scaffolding and swinging the hammer all day. We did a lot of those, and we did them several times during the day. It was really important. Next slide here, I'm going to get the panelists to maybe talk a little bit about what they see.
Joanne, can we just exit that? Come to the shop for a sec. Something I was thinking about when you were talking about carpal tunnel, talking about some of the other those pressure points in the hands. I was thinking, you know what? So I'm kind of a tool guy. I kind of love the right tool for the job and having appropriate things. I just know how much easier it is to do a job properly when you use professional tools than trying to struggle through other things. And I'm not much of a struggler. So I got a pair of pliers here that I think I got at a garage sale at one point, or maybe they were handed down from my pops, or I stole it out of his toolbox. These pliers will do plier things, right? But let me tell you that when I'm wearing a good pair of, like you say, impact gloves, they even have a stylus on the end of them. When I squeeze on this, I can already feel the strain and the stress in my hand because of these little slip joint pliers, because they're just small, a little bit awkward. But when I go to a higher quality plier such as this, which honestly, unless I really need the open part of this for a nut or something like that, this will do my plier jobs. This has a larger handle base on it. It has an easier grip. When I squeeze, I get a lot more power because of the design of the tool. So way less stress on my hand to do a plier job like this, like tiring rebar or just moving some stuff around or whatever with the pliers. When I use something like this nice, I think it's like a 9-inch lineman plier compared to a small slip joint plier like this, it costs me a little more money as an investment. But when I use this tool, I'm going to get a lot less stress on my hands. I'm going to have a lot more power with that tool, and it's going to be a lot nicer to use as well. So investing the money in good quality hand tools, because of ergonomics, because of design, you get what you pay for with that too. A lot of times is what I find. So that will help with the repetitive motion, especially if you're using these on a daily.
Definitely, and tools have come a long way. They've definitely taken consideration the repetitive use and motion and vibration. A lot of the tools on the market now do have those considerations, right? And those are selling features of the tools as well.
Oh, and also not to mention, like this is some of these pliers, because of the design of them and the design of the handles, they'll also give me protection against electricity and other hazards involved in the work processes. So yeah, just and the design, sometimes you get some extra features out of them that are just invaluable, such as being able to pull a fish tape with a pair of lineman pliers, even the cutoff tool in there. These aren't even in the same category, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just to go with that, Mike, is because sometimes you're not, if you think of it in Mike's terms there, you're not just thinking about necessarily the job you're doing, because that first set of pliers he showed might be just enough. You might be just doing a small job, might be sufficient. And you're going, okay, well, why would I spend the money on the bigger one? Well, when you're buying those pliers, you're buying it for future jobs as well. So that little bit of extra money is not only going to solve the job that you're on, it's going to solve all these future jobs, a lot of which you haven't thought about. But that good set of pliers is going to have a lot more capabilities in it.
Definitely. Okay, I'm going to go back to sharing my screen here. And here is an example of some work overhead using tools. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, this is a good one I got a tool here. Come back to the shop here, Joanne. Let's look at this. So I have a, and this is where you're typically going to see something like this. I've done this. This is when I use this. A lot of times I'm using a hole saw, and it could be on a normal drill or something like that, or I'm using a long drill bit to run electrical through joists in a house or something like that. So you're working off of a ladder, and now I have a tool. Like, this tool is heavy. I'm a pretty strong guy, but it's pretty heavy. And I'm using a 4-inch hole saw. Let's even bear that down to a 2-inch hole saw. Maybe I'm going to put a bunch of wire through a joist or something like that. These things bind. Anyone that knows anything about these hole saws is that they bind, and it's either hold on real soft or grab on real tight. I don't think that when you kind of do it in the middle somewhere, that's when I find that I can get severely injured. A hole saw or a right angle drill like this, used it improperly, or not improperly, but used up in an improper kind of like up this over top of your head and stuff like that, which is frequent. This can happen. If that binds, for one, I could fall off a ladder. And another one is if I need to understand this tool and use like the safety things inside that are given, like I'm given this handle with it, it comes off. But when I start doing stuff like this and not using that handle, I lose leverage. So I move my hand up top like this. Now I have less control over this drill. And when it binds, if I got that kind of, loose grip on it or something like that, or I'm holding it, I've actually heard of people getting their elbow caught between something, and because of the power of this right angle drill, they'll snap their forearm with using this tool. So really understanding the tool, the hazards behind it, the amount of power that's generated in this plug-in tool. I think this tool might even be a 15 amp tool, like motor in it. Like, this thing it's pretty intense. So using the drill bits changes the dynamic. using the different types of drills changes the dynamics. So really understanding how that can affect you, especially if you're standing on a ladder, is pretty crucial.
Yeah, definitely want to take considerations at working at heights and all the extra hazards. But today we're concentrating on tools, and you were talking about drills. So here's a few more examples of working with drills and applications. I know personally, I've actually had a drill jump on me. When you look at this bottom left-hand side here, I actually had a drill jump and go right through my thumbnail. So there are different injuries besides the ergonomics of them. You have to be aware, keeping your hand out of the line of fire, right?
Yeah, and a person might think like this stuff is just foolproof stuff, or that it's, you know, it just has an application, but you get drill bits that break, you get other things in mind. But when you get into some of these really cool tools like that one in the bottom, that rotary hammer drill that they got in the bottom left corner there, if you come back to the shop, some of these tools can be used in a jackhammer configuration as well. And that's when we get into proper PPE as well and stuff like that. Like using a glove like this, if I can help prevent some of those strains and tendon problems and issues with simply changing the glove I'm using based on the tool I'm using, it can change things, because this tool, it's handy as heck and it does things so I don't have to sledgehammer possibly my step apart when I want to take out a step or whatever kind of work it is that we're doing. This will do the job, but it doesn't necessarily mean there's still not hazards involved. It doesn't necessarily, it'll make your job achievable kind of thing and stuff like that. But depending on the different bits I put on it and the different application I'm using it at, this tool is powerful. These tools have a lot of power behind them. And I got to really understand that tool and the owner's manual for a lot of these tools. You go into an owner's manual. I know who wants to read the owner's manual of every tool they own, but if you go in there when you purchase it and try to get an understanding of that tool, a lot of times it's highlighted or bolded or whatever. Some of them are common things, not to mention you can watch YouTube. You can watch a lot of these videos where they show these tools in action, and you can kind of understand what am I getting into when I use it. Because even in a workforce, when we give someone a tool to use to go and jackhammer or drill or whatever it is, they might not understand a lot of the details of what that matters, how that matters, and maybe even taking rest breaks and things like that.
The other thing to keep in mind too, when you're thinking about these tools, is even if you do understand it, if you're teaching somebody new in this same tool, right? Just understand the competency of a small drill compared to a big drill, where you just might be proficient. Like you got your muscle strength up, you've worked on this tool, you got your technique, so you don't need the same sort of strength because you just know and understand that tool. But now you're training somebody new, and you're training them on something that might be a little more powerful at the time than what they should maybe be starting at. You know, whether it be a saw or a drill or whatever, you know, make sure that they understand the equipment, maybe on the smaller version of that equipment if you have it. Because binding, yeah, like that, you know, I got a personal experience with that. This was like a long time ago before, you know, safety was a big thing, but I was actually working on an aluminum ladder, and it was with a corded tool, because that was another thing that wasn't as easy to get now as battery powered tools. But I was trying to drill through some metal on a oil rig. We were trying to add a hole to it, and it bound, and then the cord got wrapped around, and then it got so tight that it actually snapped the cord apart. And then now live electricity hits my aluminum ladder. On top of that, it was raining out, so I was wet. And like, I remember a flash, and then I remember lying on my back on the ground in a puddle, right? And, you know, thank goodness there's a breaker on that trip. And I was only about, you know, 6 feet in the air. I shouldn't say only, because that's enough. But yeah, like just binding. And that wasn't on that powerful of a drill. And, you know, I grew up on a farm. You think you know your tools, you know, you think you got all this skill, but, you know, it just takes trying to get a job done really fast in the rain. Yeah.
Wow. When it rains, it pours.
Yeah.
Another thing I wanted to, I brought the screen back up, a mention here. I don't know, Kieran, if you want to comment on the PPE. Why are they wearing different PPE in these pictures here?
Within Saskatchewan legislation, a few of these pieces would not be 100% what you need. So in different situations where there's a risk of damage to the eye, which when you're using pretty much any hand tool that has electricity or uses battery power, like you're using force, like Steve said, a small drill can provide a lot of force. And if you're going into concrete, different things, metal, different shards, shavings, pieces might go into your eye. And just to build on what Steve was talking about, training is 100% paramount. I remember as a young worker getting into the workforce, I was given a hammer drill and they were like, use it, use this. And I look at this item and I have no idea how to use it. It's heavy, it was loud, it was dangerous. Like, for example, it was trying to get bricks out of a driveway, but the bricks had been concreted in basically or mortared. So trying to jackhammer these bricks out, and there's a spinning function and there's a hammering function. And what I didn't understand was you're not supposed to hammer on these items. So as an 18-year-old, the first day on the job, hammering with a drill that says hammer drill, and the person comes and screams at you, that's not training. So when we have younger workers, we have inexperienced workers, we want to ensure that they're comfortable with the things you're using, because I surely wasn't that day. And learning from that mistake, I made sure to understand tools before I used them in the future.
Definitely. And speaking of some more dangerous tools and things that need training, let's bring up our power actuated tools here.
Yeah, so Steve, I think if you wanna leave, I think that I have one of these in real life right here. Steve knows a lot about these. I think he's used them a lot more than I have, but I picked up one of these Ramset powder actuated tools for doing when I'm building my basement and stuff. I need to put the walls down to the concrete and secure the bottom of them. So that's what I was using this tool for. So I got a nail here, and then you actually put a charge in here, 22 caliber charge, which I have right here. And that, for a lot of people, they know this, but this is it's got gunpowder in it. And it's a charge that if I use this tool improperly, for one, I could gunshot a nail into my leg or my hand or whatever, but there's also some other areas. So you put it all together, you put this down on top of the wood that you want to put into the concrete or whatever, steel into steel, all kinds of different applications. And then I would just hammer on the back of this, and it basically gunshots it in, and it jumps off in that. Steve, you want to chat about the actual handheld, the gun style ones?
Yeah, they're the similar idea where you're basically you're using a gunshot to shoot a pin into the ground. But as you can see, like in the bottom left or the other applications there, you're holding it quite differently, right? So you got the for Mike's application, you're hitting a hammer, and it can jump all like this. So you're not worried about jamming your elbows quite so much. If you go to the top right there, he's applying pressure to the top there to hold it down, because you want that nail to go into the concrete, right? You're thinking about going, like, it's going to go through that wood easily, but you don't want it to jump, and you want to be pushing down as hard as you can, because you don't want any gap where that concrete's just going to split underneath or shatter, and then you've just wasted a cartridge. You now can't shoot in that area anymore. You lost your integrity. So most people are pushing down as hard as they can. And if you're pushing down with a locked elbow, like, the shot coming back at you is tremendous. So you really know how to use these tools, and not just how to hold it when you're pressing down on it, but you can see that there's a yellow pin in there. Well, there's different colors, right? The green one isn't as powerful as the yellow one, which isn't as powerful as the red one, right? So to understand those colors. It's all on the side of the box, but you know, steel, hard concrete, masonry, brick, all these different are different sets of malleability, so they require harder shot going into them. So the length of your nail, like in this case, you're going to need your 1.5 inches. You're going to think 1.5 inches for your 2x4 plus 1/2 inch into your concrete. So that's what you have to think about for the size of your nail. There's a dial down on there. So all these things need to be, it's not just shooting in. If you've ever used a framing nail gun or something like that, if you're off on your nail size, it's not going to hold quite as well, but it's certainly not going to do the damage to you or the tool that it would do for this application if you're off on your size. Even if you're too short, the ramrod inside will just shoot out and jam out the end. So there's lots to think about. It's got its whole section in the manual in here in regards to cleaning it, like just respecting this tool a lot. So you know, if there's a section called power actuated tools, it tells you a little bit about the necessity to learn this tool really well. So this is above and beyond teaching your worker how your skill saw works, right? Like, you know, that's all great, but this is a tool you got to respect.
Yeah, I think that ties together with yours and Kieran's point, basically on, like, do you want your workers wrecking your tools? Because that'll happen if you don't train them. Plus, they could get hurt, injured, and just not have the proper application, using the wrong nails, using the wrong things. You could put a lot of people in danger in a lot of situations. So there's getting the job done properly, and there's getting the job done safely. And I think those things tie together, and that's the idea behind procedures. That's the idea behind training, and all of that stuff is, yes, you want to make sure people get it done correctly and use the right tool for the right job, and also have the end product you're desiring, so strength and integrity of your finished product. But at the same time, for predictable outcomes, you got to make sure that workers are doing this safe. And that's seriously, I grew up on the pipeline essentially in my working world, and that's what it was, Kieran. It was a whole bunch of yelling, basically, because I wasn't trained. There was no training really. It was like, go do something, and then you're called silly for doing it wrong when the training wasn't in place. So they should go to a mirror, and how about start yelling in the mirror kind of thing is where they should start, because a lot of it is just improper training and then understanding the idea of what that training should consist of.
Yeah, that's what's a lot of safety nowadays. We take a look, and when something goes wrong, what's the first thing we generally do is we take a look at, why did you do that action? When internally we should be taking a look at, why did the system fail? What part of the safety program was at fault for this particular incident? And for most of these tools, you can take a look back at, someone didn't want to take the training, or someone didn't give the training. The person is new. So we got to take a look at all the factors that combine of the system and look at the synergy of how these things work. Because like you just said, quality, safety, and productivity are inextricably linked. So we take a look at someone who's working unsafe, their quality of work is very likely to be lower than someone who respects the tool, respects the training they have had, and as well as quality and productivity, I mean. So if we take a look at all those factors, we have to ensure that when we train people, it's an investment on how they're going to do the job, how long they're going to do the job properly, incident cost on your insurances. So it's very important to train people on these tools, is no matter how small it might seem.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. Regardless whether you're using this power actuated tool that we just mentioned, or you're using a hammer, like, there is a wrong way to use a hammer that can result in the injuries and the syndromes that we talked about earlier, right? So whether it's an everyday tool that anybody can get, or one that's more complex. I know, Mike, we're talking about tools. Did you want to move on to, I think you mentioned nailers.
Yeah, so I have a few different nailers, and I just decided to pull out my framing nailers. So this is a typical framing nailer. This is plastic collated nails, blah, 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 different angles, different things, but a lot of them work similarly. A tool like this, man, and I tell you, so I love tools because it helps me do the jobs, but how on point are you guys when you're talking about like it starts with the tools? Because a lot of times there's tools involved in processes. So we can train people all we want on processes. We can have procedures in place and all that stuff. But if we don't have proper practices in place, and we don't have the do's and the don'ts of, say, a nailer like this, and we don't teach them of the tools like the hammer, man, I wish someone would have taught me about proper hammer use and stuff like that. How do I hold the hammer? What to do with the hammer? What don't do with the hammer? Because same with all kinds of, even the simple hand tools. But a tool like this, there's a lot of people that end up with a nail stuck in their body. Okay, now how did they get a nail stuck in their body? The convenientness of it is, oh man, are they ever idiots? Wow, I just can't believe that they got, no, maybe possibly not. But like when I was using, so I remember framing some of my basement. I was working with a journeyman carpenter. I got some training on the nailer and stuff like that. But I was nailing the top of the wall to the studs when it's laying on the ground, right? So you got to go through the end of the thing. And I'm holding the stud flush with the top plate of the thing, but I'm holding it right at the end of the stud, close to the top plate where I'm nailing it. And the guy says to me, he looks over and he says, hey man, like chill out for a sec. The nail's a 3.5-inch nail or a 3-inch nail or whatever we were using. It can ricochet, kind of come off and come sideways through the top plate. Well, the very next stud that I'm nailing in, it would have shot me right in the hand. It went right, it just ricocheted off and it came sideways through that stud and it came up and it stuck right out, and I had to pull the nail because it's in the way now or whatever, but it would have been right on my hand, right where my hand was. So I don't necessarily like the idea that someone gets hurt and we just blame the person, especially with a hand tool like this. There could be people that are framing garages. I could go get a job tomorrow framing garages. I guarantee this because I know how to use things. I'm pretty smart. I know how to read a tape measure. So I'm pretty sure that someone might hire me to frame garages if that's what they did. Doesn't necessarily mean that I know how to use this tool based off of my experience. I'm a journeyman welder. I don't use nailers and welding. And I might even own the tool. So it's very important to not assume things of people, because this tool, Steve, have you ever known someone that got hurt by a nailer?
I could just talk about myself twice, actually.
Yeah.
And one in my early years and one in my later years, and the exact same injury, like a nail, like right through my hand, and it was literally the exact same and almost the same kind of concept. One was because, you know, you're taking a long time to push, but I was, you know, as angled properly, and it was just a matter of learning experience. The second one is I was so confident in it, I was just napping away with the guy next to me, and we were kind of racing, and you just think that you're the best sort of thing, and yeah, next thing you know, you got a nail in your hand. It can happen. Like they are highly effective for getting the job done really fast, but that's the danger involved is you're just multi-firing those nails. And you know, the one thing they got that double safety mechanism on there. Like you have to be pulling a trigger and you have to be pushing the safety nozzle at the same time in order for that to happen. So you think, well, how am I going to shoot anything or anybody? Well, if you're not trained to walk with your finger off the trigger, then all of a sudden you trip and you put it into your leg. And I've seen it, right? I've seen that happen. You know, a guy's coming down a ladder or something like that. So he's just not thinking, and he's bringing the nail down before his knee comes down, and he just didn't have his finger off the trigger. It's that simple. So, or, you know, just not teaching somebody to properly inspect it. Like there is a tiny little spring at the top there that keeps that nosing out, right? And without that spring keeping that nosing out, then that nosing just stays out and it's no good anymore. It'll just come back in because that spring, and that's all it takes, is a 5-cent spring to turn that from a safe tool with double safety features on it to not safe at all. It'll start double bouncing. Like, yeah, it's incredible. Like what it takes just to quickly check, make sure it's safe. quickly train somebody in how to carry this tool, it doesn't take long. And the benefits of that training at the beginning is just, you know, magnified throughout the rest of the day and the week and the month. And now you've got a guy that can, a competent worker that can train another competent worker. Like it snowballs. Like competency, just you'll see the effects a long ways down the road.
Those are very great points. As well, don't forget that, you know, besides having the proper training, even if you are properly trained, using that type of tool all day, every day, the strain, the holding it goes back to, you know, rotate maybe some of your tasks with other people, so you're not completely, you know, doing those wear and tear on your wrists and your arms, and depending on your framing on your knees. Like, so all those conditions that we mentioned earlier, you can be using it the way it's supposed to be used and still develop these conditions. So making sure you're taking breaks and stretching and rotating some of your activity is going to be really important as well.
And also understanding that the new guy is going to require more breaks. He's just on that tool like that. This gun that feels light to you because you've used it every day and you just understand it, and you've built up that strength and that skill. You know, the guy that's just starting out on his first day, that gun's going to feel really heavy by 10 o'clock in the morning if he's been building walls all morning, right? Like so just understand that those extra breaks for the new guy is or new person, I guess, is a lot more necessary.
I'm just sharing another screen. I think we have time for one more. Here we have some workers in action here, and you can see the bricklayer doing that all day. Yeah, he's using a hand tool, but if he's doing that all day, right, what are the effects after years going to be, right? So understanding how to take care of your body, recognize the signs, and if an injury occurs, to let yourself heal is so important.
An interesting point to be made here is if we take a look at his posture, he's at 90 degrees here. And as the wall gets higher, he'll be at a different degree. But the most interesting part is that when your body's at 30 degrees is when it's considered an awkward posture. So quite a bit less leaning forward than that. And when you're at 50 degrees, your body does not use the muscles anymore, and it's strictly on the ligaments. So the ligaments are what's holding you together here. So when you pick up a brick that's maybe 3 pounds, you have to think about how much force is exerted on the lower back. So an extremely large amount of force is going to be applied to that low back, and it's going to cause injury rather quickly. So different lifting posture, ensuring that you don't lean over like this, getting knee pads, lowering your body position, finding some way to eliminate the hazard of bending over will stop you from acquiring a musculoskeletal disorder within years. Because standing like that will absolutely get you nowhere fast. And if that nowhere is an injury.
And definitely, and looking at the second picture, you see that he actually went down on his knees, and he does have the knee pads. He's a little bit more in a better position, but still it's somewhat going to be strenuous if you're doing that all day. So with the bricklayer, if like simply going down closer to his work level would help as well. Like bending with your knees and actually working closer to the ground would actually help relieve some of that tension. Do you want to take a look at a couple vibrating tools here?
Yeah, so these are interesting. This is just like
so there's
yeah, this is all the vibrations and the strain you're going to have on your arms and your wrists and your hands over time. I've used jumping jacks, plate tampers, jackhammers like this, and it's strenuous because you're dragging these things around. Like you have to physically handle these tools that have a substantial weight to them, or let the tool do the work. And if you can find that balance of letting the tool do the work and having the right angles on it and stuff like that, the difference at the end of the day is almost like a 15-year difference. Like it's like some people feel like they just used it for, 36 hours, and other people feel just fine at the end of the day. And a lot of times it's a direct result of the ergonomics behind how they're using the tool and the understanding of how to use that tool. What is actually going on here, and how do I use it so that it's not so strenuous on my body? Because like that brute jackhammer there, those things are heavy. Like they just are. And if it's just getting lugged around and you don't know how to use it, and you're using a bit that's getting stuck constantly in the concrete, and you have to tear it out and stuff like that, the strain on your body is just enormous. And so talk about switching tasks, doing things properly, proper training, all that stuff's pertinent when it comes to any of these tools. I have a 3/4 inch impact at home, which I don't use. Okay, like I don't use this because I don't have the air capacity at this point. But when I do, if I get, I'd be better off just torching the nuts off. But this tool, the vibration behind this tool and stuff, I've heard of people breaking their hands. Right, this gets caught up on something, and it binds or whatever, and it'll break people's hands and stuff. So these tools, these vibration tools, and all that stuff, I'd like to hear what you guys have to say about that. But this stuff it can cause long-term problems for sure.
Yeah, I like what you said about letting the tool work for you. Like those last 3 tools that you saw in there, you know, you're looking at that Sawzall and just make that guard is actually up against the pipe. It's going to completely, or not completely, but really take away that vibrating of the saw going down, or that tamper. You know, if you're on the right ground and you know when to turn it, it'll pull you, right? So if you know, it comes with a little bit of experience, but these tools, you know, they can be used properly. You can make it a lot longer throughout the day if you just have certain techniques and processes. And that, again, I just can't stress enough about training and just making sure that, you know, you can't just stand over and helicopter somebody, but you have to be watching and making sure, let them make, you know, mistakes, but make them minor mistakes, right? So, okay, this is what he doesn't know. Let's correct this. And you know, like, you're not going to learn without having any mistakes, that's for sure. But to know how to eventually use that tool, man, that makes a world of difference.
Well, Steve,
Absolutely.
and Kieran, you would be able to attest to this because you're a little closer to the new worker than I is. But like this stuff, if a new worker understands their role in the workplace too, you gotta ask. You gotta say, this tool is beating me up. Right? Like, how do I use this easier? And someone will, hopefully, if they know what they're doing, they'll be able to teach you.
And that's your right to participate, right? You have the right to participate in health and safety activities, which includes training, which includes all these things. So when you ask your company, like, and you're not comfortable using a tool that has extreme vibrations because the implications are unknown, you have the right to understand the tool.
Definitely. Even myself, when I first started out, somebody told me, oh, this is the best hammer ever. And so I went out and got one, but it was completely wrong for me. Like within a week, even though they told me how to hold it, they gave me the training, it was just it was just wrong for me. Like I was hurting, and I just got a different tool. I got like a different hammer, and that was made differently, and it was great for me. So sometimes not every tool, because somebody says it's great, is good for you. So, and that's just a hand tool. But I think that brings us to the end of our time. And to sum it up, like, you want to have good training on your tools, understand even big or small, hand tools do have hazards, especially if they're being used incorrectly in proper training. And even when you are confident and you are using it right, there's still associated hazards to using hand tools. And you should be aware of the symptoms and make sure to seek medical advice if these things are reoccurring, and because you want to take care of yourself first and foremost. So again, thank you for joining us today for this webinar Wednesday. Please come back, and on Tuesday we have a toolbox talk on PME, and Laura will be presenting that. So again, thank you.